So the third Sunday of Lent, with this very long reading of the woman at the well. It's always the Sunday when the altar servers get to show off their time at the gym, how long they've been carrying those candles there, ladies. I'm kidding, you guys are going to be priests, right? Now, we'll see. We'll keep praying about it. So we are continuing now, third Sunday of Lent. Still going on with our little marathon of sacrifices for the Lord. And I want to draw our attention just very briefly to the first reading, actually, with maybe just a brief remark here in the Gospel, since it was such a long reading. We see the Jews complaining, "Why did you bring us out here? Did you bring us out here to starve us to death?" All right, is the Lord with us, or is he not with us? It's a kind of a salient point, and I think a lot of people hear this at one point or another, but it's great to be reminded. The Jews were wandering in the desert for 40 years. And if you've ever looked at a map and seen the distance between Egypt and Israel, that does not take 40 years to walk, right? I mean, it's desert. If you get really, dizzy and, really bad sickness and everything, it might take you a couple years if you're really, really wandering. But it does not take 40 years to walk that distance. If you know where you're going, it might be a little less than a year. If you're a fast walker and you know how to walk through the desert, I don't know. But not 40 years. So why? I mean, the Lord obviously is doing something if they are wandering through the desert that long. And so we have to ask, what is he doing there? We have to realize that the story of the Israelites and their freedom from Egypt is not just about the Lord delivering them from slavery, from bondage under the Egyptians, although that's a very important part, and it's something to which the Israelites are indebted to God. It is why they celebrate him, right? That the Lord brought us out of Egypt with strong arm. He defeated Pharaoh and his armies and delivered us from bondage. But it's not just that. The Israelites are in the desert for 40 years because previously they lived in Egypt for 400 years. We see that in the scripture, 400 years. And what happened during that time? The Israelites adopted the gods, the idolatry, and the cultic worship of the Egyptians. So what did God have to do? Right? Not only did he have to deliver them physically from Egypt, but after leaving Egypt, even though their bodies were outside and they were headed toward the promised lands, their hearts are still in Egypt. They still have all the inclinations of all the idolatrous worship of Egypt. And so the Lord has to purify their hearts. We see here, if I can find it because it's a really long reading, but we see here Jesus saying, "Believe me, woman, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. The hour is coming and is here now when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. And indeed, the Father seeks such people to worship him." So God does not just want a people for his own. He wants a people who are completely in love with him and who will be faithful to him alone. That's the kind of worshipers that the Lord wants. It's the kind of worshipers that the Lord demands. That's what Jesus is teaching us here today. And it's what God was teaching the people Israel through those 40 very long, complicated, difficult years. Is that it's not just about being out of bondage. It's about being freed from the bondage of sin, freed from the bondage of idolatry. So that's the purpose. That's the purpose of those 40 years. And we can apply that very easily to ourselves, because that 40 years in the desert, maybe Jesus' 40 days are supposed to be our 40 days in the desert are supposed to be our 40 days of Lent, right? Duh, right? It's a pretty easy connection. So the whole point of doing all this is so that we can have those vices that are our Egypts, as it were, right? Our idolatries of different sorts also drawn out of our hearts. So that we can also be removed of all those things that keep us from being those worshipers who worship the Father in spirit and truth, just like Jesus wants of this Samaritan woman, just like Jesus wants of all of us. So continue to offer those vices. Continue to offer those little particular sins and habits. Fasting helps a lot with it. The church has seen great wisdom in how fasting truly somehow just primes us to let go of our attachments, our sinful habits, and allows us to turn to Him instead. But if you're also not intentional with maybe extra time in prayer, or having a come to Jesus moment with yourself and being like, wow, I really am a gossip, or I really lay into my spouse way more than I should, or something like that, then don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, because the 40 years in the desert are not just a punishment, it's not just a penance. It most certainly is. It most certainly is a penance. But we also turn to things like the book of Hosea, the prophet, where we see that the people Israel being called into the desert is almost like a lover calling his lover out to be with him alone in the desert. We see that in Hosea. God talks about using caressing words. I will draw my lover out into the desert to be with me. So there's something really beautiful. There's something intimate. There's something kind of romantic there too. Which is to say, we purify ourselves of our attachments, of our vices, and whatever it is, so on and so forth. Not of our own efforts, but truly in and through love with Jesus. In and through love for God. And that's actually the only way that it's going to be fruitful. Lent can't be a kind of a self-help project, you checking a bunch of boxes. If you don't have the Lord as your friend, you're not going anywhere, my friends. Okay, you're going to keep wandering in that desert, and it's not going to be fruitful. So, let this time of Lent, your 40 days, be not just a time of that penance, of course, but also a time to grow deeper in that intimacy with the Lord, that He calls you, each and every single one of you, with that caressing voice, because truly we are all the beloved of God. Let Him call you out to friendship and you to work on those things with you. Maybe for Lent, add a little extra prayer time, whatever it is, something where you can sit down, close your eyes, and experience the love of the Lord. Let Him permeate your heart. Let Him know, allow yourself to know that you are truly loved by Him and that He wishes to do all these things with you. Be hungry with Jesus. Be thirsty with Jesus. Go through your temptations of Lent with Jesus, just like He went through those. So that truly, at the end of our Lent, we might be able to become worshipers in spirit and truth. That's my little advice for today. I do hope you take maybe some more time today to go through this gospel passage. It is so rich. Maybe a little plug. No money has been given to me, I promise, but if you haven't seen The Chosen, this image on that series is fantastic, so maybe even go home and watch that episode today. But I hope that this continues to be fruitful, that you continue to unite yourselves, not only in penance, but in love to the Lord during your 40 days journey this Lent.